The sun dips low over the blood-soaked plains of Troy, casting jagged shadows toward the sea. At the edge of the Greek trench, a man stands alone. He is not clad in bronze, he carries no shield, he holds no spear. Yet as the Trojan host surges forward, drunk on the death of Patroclus, they freeze. Achilles has returned. He stands on the precipice of the ditch, a nightmare given flesh. Above his head, a column of golden flame erupts into the darkening sky, a beacon of divine fury piercing the smoke. He stands at the trench, eyes burning with a light not of this world. Across the divide, the Trojans see a ghost made of fire. Can a man stripped of his armor still command the tides of fate? Or will the weight of the Trojan bronze finally crush the spirit of the Pelides? For 10 long years, the name Achilles was a wall. It was the boundary between Trojan survival and Greek triumph. But for weeks, that wall had vanished. Withdrawn into his tent, nursing a wounded pride more agonizing than any spear thrust, the greatest warrior of the age had let the world burn around him. He had watched from the sterns of his ships as the Trojan prince Hector pushed the Greeks back to the salt of the Aegean. The reputation of Achilles, once a terrifying certainty, had become a ghost story, a memory of a man who no longer cared for the fate of kings. The Greek camp had become a place of desperation, a mud-slicked graveyard where the heroes fell one by one under the relentless Trojan sun. The prophecy of his own death hung over him like a low, grey cloud, yet it was not death he feared, but the silence of an irrelevant life. The plan was born of a desperate divine necessity. Patroclus, the soul of Achilles, lay dead, his body a prize contested in the dirt. Hector, the breaker of horses, walked the field wearing the very armor of Achilles, the celestial bronze stripped from the fallen friend. Achilles had no protection, no harness to gird his loins, no helmet to mask his grief. The smith god Hephaestus was even now at his forge, beating out a new destiny in metal. The Trojans would not wait for the hammer to fall. Iris, the wind-footed messenger, descended with a command from Hera. Achilles must not fight, for he has no shield to catch the spears. He must simply be seen. He must go to the trench, stand before the enemy, and let his presence do what 1,000 swords could not. It was a strategy of pure psychological terror, the weaponization of a legend that refused to die. Achilles rose from his mourning, his heart a hollowed-out cavern of rage. He did not wash the dust from his face or the dried blood of Patroclus from his hands. He walked toward the earthworks, the deep ditch that separated the Greek ships from the Trojan fire. As he moved, the goddess Athena draped her aegis around his shoulders, the terrifying mantle of Zeus himself, fringed with the heads of 100 serpents, crackling with celestial power. She wreathed his head in a golden cloud and kindled from it a flame that shone like the fires lit on a besieged island to signal for help. He stood at the edge of the trench, far from the reach of the Trojan spears, yet his shadow seemed to stretch across the entire plain. He did not speak. He did not call for his horses. He simply looked upon the men who had killed his heart and his honor. He raised his hand, a scarred and empty palm, and gripped the air as if he were strangling the very spirit of the Trojan army. The first cry breaks from his throat, and the world goes still. It is not the shout of a man. It is the roar of the earth cracking open. Behind him, Athena adds her own immortal voice, a brassy metallic scream that vibrates in the marrow of every living thing on the field. The Trojan horses rear up in their traces, sensing the presence of a predator that is not of the natural order. Charioteers look at one another with eyes wide and white, their hands trembling on the reins. They see the fire above his head and believe the gods have descended to finish the war in a single heartbeat. The pride of burning the Greek ships evaporates like mist in a gale. They see the grave. Achilles screams a second time. This sound is sharper, more focused, a blade of noise that cuts through the chaos of the retreat. The Trojan lines, once a disciplined wall of bronze, begin to buckle and fold. Men trip over their own shields. Chariots collide in the narrow spaces between the fires, wheels shattering against wheels. The struggle is no longer between armies. It is a struggle between the human mind and a terror it cannot endure. 12 of the bravest Trojan leaders are crushed in the panic, trampled by their own horses, or run through by the spears of their own terrified comrades. Achilles stands motionless, his feet planted in the Greek soil, his voice the only weapon he needs. He is the storm, and they are the dry leaves. Action meets consequence with the speed of a falling star as he draws breath for his final world-shaking call to the heavens. He cries out a third time, the final peal of the divine trumpet. The sound ripples across the Scamander River, shaking the reeds and silencing the birds. The Trojan retreat becomes a rout. They abandon the pursuit of the Greek ships, fleeing back toward the safety of their high walls, leaving the body of Patroclus behind. Achilles watches them fly, his face a mask of stone beneath the flickering halo of gold that marks his return. He does not chase them. He cannot. He is a god in appearance, but a man in vulnerability, and he knows that without his armor, a single stray arrow could end the legend. But the work is done. The tide that had been drowning the Greeks for 16 books of war has been halted by a single, unarmed man. In that moment of absolute power, the revelation strikes with more force than the scream itself. Achilles realizes that his presence is not a gift to his people, but a curse of fate. He is the pivot upon which the world turns, yet he is also the prisoner of that rotation. He sees the Trojans fleeing in terror and knows that his return means his own death is now a certainty. The golden flame is not a crown of victory, it is a funeral pyre lit in advance for a hero already lost. The scream was his rebirth as a monster of war. As the echo dies away, he feels the weight of the bronze he does not yet wear, heavy as the earth itself. The sun finally vanishes, and a thick, unnatural darkness settles over the plain. The Greeks, weeping with relief and awe, carry the broken body of Patroclus back to the ships. They move in silence, glancing back at the figure who still glows with fire. The camp is filled with the smell of salt and the sound of waves, but beneath it is the low, rhythmic chanting of the Myrmidons, mourning their fallen prince. Achilles descends from the earthworks, the aegis slipping from his shoulders as the goddess withdraws. He is small again, a man walking through the dark, his hands shaking not with fear, but with the aftershock of the divine energy that had just surged through his lungs. The cost of this moment is etched into the very soil. 12 Trojan captains lie dead without a single Greek sword being drawn. The fear of Achilles has been burned into their minds with such intensity that they will never stand firm against him again. But for Achilles, the cost is finality. By stepping onto that trench, he has signed the pact with the fates. He has chosen the short, glorious life over peace. It was not the strength of his arm that turned the tide of the war. It was the terrifying weight of a man's soul laid bare before the world. Achilles proved that the most potent weapon is the presence of one who has accepted his fate. The Trojans fled because they were fighting something that could no longer be killed by conventional means, a man fueled by a grief so vast it required a goddess to express. In the Trojan camp, the council gathers under cold stars. The wise Polydamas urges a retreat behind the massive walls now that Achilles has returned. But Hector, blinded by his success and wearing the stolen armor of the man who just terrified his army, refuses. He commands the men to stay on the plain and face the dawn. It is a fatal mistake, born of pride. The final tragedy is set. History remembers Achilles for his prowess with the spear, but in the trial of the 3 Cries, he learned that his greatest power was the authority of a man who has nothing left to lose. The armor of Hephaestus is cooling in the forge, and the dawn will bring a rage the world has never seen. Walk with us through the old stories. Subscribe to Saga Weaver, where ancient warriors face impossible choices.